podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Favour the podcast. It's Martin here, and you're joining us the morning after Sunderland's first Premier League defeat in 8 years. Unfortunately, it was our first Premier League defeat in 2 games, but we'll overlook that one for now. But yes, the lads went down 2-0 at Burnley yesterday in a game that most of us were actually pretty confident of getting something out of. So joining me to have a bit of a chat about that one, I've got a couple of people on the call, but first of all is Gavin Henderson. How are you, Gav?
I'm all right, mate. Yeah. It's a Sunday morning, isn't it? We're still here. We're not. The world hasn't ended, contrary to how some people may have reacted to the defeat yesterday. We are still here. We're still living and breathing. But I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yes, no, I'm very good. Thank you very much. And also with us today for his first appearance of the season on Favour the podcast is Nick Barnes from BBC Radio Newcastle. How are you, Nick?
Good, all good, yeah. Echo what Gav says. We're all still here and we're still breathing.
We are, which is always a good thing. Nick, it's the first time you've been on since before around the playoffs, I think, wasn't it? How have you viewed the way that Sunderland have approached the pre-season? Because I think it's kind of taken us all a little bit, maybe by surprise is the wrong word, but I think we've kind of been a little bit surprised, I guess, by the way that Sunderland have approached their preparation for the Premier League. How have you seen it?
I think we've all been nicely surprised. I think we all expected or hoped that there would be some sort of investment in the squad, because I think everybody was, patently aware that the squad that came up last season was not, in inverted commas, fit for purpose, because the gulf between the Championship and the Premier League, as we know, and that's been proved so pertinently over the last couple of seasons, is so wide that there had to be some sort of investment. But what has pleased me is that the investment has been very clever. It's very astute in the terms of the players that they've been bringing in, whilst they've stuck largely to their principles of trying to sign young upcoming players. Those young upcoming players are players that have been playing in largely European leagues, top flight leagues, have a fair smattering of European experience. On top of that, they blew everybody away when they signed Granit Xhaka, who's got his experience is immeasurable, and what he brings, as we've seen these last couple of games, what he brings in terms of professionalism and discipline and everything to the squad is exemplary. And also you can see that what they've done is signed in the forwards and the midfield players, those young late teens, early 20s, those players that are going to have a sell-on value that over time will hopefully prove that they are very, very good technically and also the ability-wise in terms of the Premier League, they're able to deal with that. But the defence, they've gone for experience. On the whole, they've gone for players in their later 20s, early 30s, who've got that raft of experience, which they're going to need at the back, because you can see how Sunderland set the team up, defend, don't concede goals if you can help it, and quick, swift counterattacks. So the business they've done, I think, has blown everybody away. I think the numbers has certainly surprised everybody. I was hoping for 5 or 6, I think, minimum players to come in around the £20 million bracket, because that would be the market I thought they would be working in. But in fact, they've doubled that. They're going to probably get near 14 players in, and they've built a whole new squad. And in fact, you can argue now they've got 2 squads. They've probably got a League Cup, FA Cup squad, and a Premier League squad. So I think that's good moving forwards as well. So overall, delighted. I think it's been a fantastic window. The mood of optimism has been breathtaking. It's everybody I've spoken to from outside the region can't believe when I say, everyone's really optimistic, because their assumption are that Sunderland, Burnley, Leeds are nailed and to go straight back down again. Whereas here, it's the opposite. I think the mood is very much reflected by that first game, that win over West Ham, and everybody believes that Sunderland can stay up, regardless of yesterday's result against Burnley.
And Nick, from a professional point of view, obviously you've been commentating on Sunderland for decades now, and you've spent the last few years obviously with us in League One and the Championship. How nice is it from a professional perspective to be back commentating on Premier League football? Obviously at Turf Moor, that's a ground that you've been to last season with Sunderland, but is it different commentating in the Premier League, obviously outside of what's going on the pitch? How is it off the pitch? Are there noticeable differences?
Well, off the pitch, I mean, on the pitch, in some sense, the only difference is the quality of football has gone up. You know, you're looking at a different quality of football. Off the pitch, it's a bit of a media circus, to be honest. You know, whereas you mentioned League One and the Championship, and even the Championship at that level, it's one man and a dog basically covering the games. You don't get the national newspaper lads. You don't get TV. You don't get all the radio, or largely you don't get the radio. After matches, it's you and one or two others interviewing the manager and the players. Now there's a whole plethora of bodies, TV, radio, newspapers, press conferences are full. So that's a completely different landscape now. And interestingly, there are people I've not seen for 8 years who work in TV. And yesterday, Steve Bauer from Match of the Day came up and said, "Oh, great. Good to see you again. Welcome back." And it's these people I haven't seen for 8 years. Who were, people I saw week in, week out, because that was the circuit when you're in the Premier League. And it's like you've been airbrushed out of life, because life doesn't exist outside the Premier League for these people. So that's the big change.
Sorry, Nick, are they not looking at you and going, "Bloody hell, are you still going? Are you still doing
Yeah,
that?"
well, there's partly that as well, yeah. And so, you really? Yeah, I'm still here. So that in a sense, that's quite nice. You catch up with people you haven't seen for a lot of years. And they're actually, what's been nice over the 2 games, and it's only 2 games, is they're all really happy to see Sunderland back. I think there's a big feeling it's really, really good to have Sunderland back in the Premier League from the media perspective. It's great. I think last week was reflected by all the comments I heard from the Nationals about the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light, how fantastic it was. And there was a real buzz around that. And, yesterday, as you, Martin, as you said about Burnley, yeah, we've been there many times before, and it was a little bit like stepping back in time, because whereas Sunderland have had to spend millions on upgrading the stadium and doing everything that the Premier League requires, Burnley, in theory, should have done that, and they've done it to a certain extent. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done at Turf Moor to bring it right up to the standard that Sunderland are clearly following at the moment. So it was a little bit of a throwback yesterday in those terms, but not in a bad way. I quite enjoy going. I enjoyed the Championship. For that sort of, it was reality for me. Football. It was football. You didn't know 1 week from the next what the results were going to be. There was a little bit more, I think, little less of the circus, a little bit more of the reality, if you like. So it is a change. It's a big change, and we'll see more of it when we go to the Etihads, the Emirates, and Anfield, and so on. That's where it really hits you that the Premier League now is an absolute. It's a beast. It's a massive financial beast, and everything's geared towards money.
It certainly is. And Gav, look, I think all of us were probably expecting to get something from Turf Moor. I know you did a podcast with James Copley and Johnny on it went out on Saturday, and it went out on the morning of the game. And I think you said you'd be disappointed if we only got a draw. I was forecasting a win. I went for us to win 2-1. And even when we went to goal down, I was thinking my forecast is going to come in here, because I was confident of us turning it around, but it didn't. So did we get a little bit ahead of ourselves, do you think?
Possibly, yeah. I think we, if you listen to that podcast, we actually talked about how for Burnley this was a big occasion because it was their return to the Premier League, their first home game. And just like we had the week before, and just like Leeds did have on Monday, that's quite a pivotal moment, not just in the season, but in their sort of their story. And I know they were here 2 years ago, but obviously they won the league. They've had to fight to get back to the Premier League, and after losing last week, their fans were probably really keen to just see the team and get behind them and try and get a win. And when you look at the sort of the lay of the fixtures, regardless of whether this game was second in the season or 38th game in the season, it's still a massive game because you're playing a team who you got promoted with, and it's a home game. So Burnley will have really built themselves up to get 3 points from this one, whereas when they went to Tottenham, being honest, they were probably happy if they'd come away with a point, right? I mean, that's a much different task to playing Sunderland at home. And maybe we didn't underestimate that to a degree. It's very easy to get carried away because we were so good against West Ham, and it was such a good win that you almost go, well, what's next then? If we can do that at West Ham, what can we do to Burnley? But when you think mentally, despite the fact West Ham's team probably cost, I don't know, up to 200 million to put together, it's quite an expensively assembled team, whether or not they played well. Mentally, they're in a very different place to Burnley. Burnley are so excited about the season and just want to get off and running, and it's still like us. They're in that honeymoon period of the season where the initial enthusiasm after promotion still there. You know, you kind of ride that wave for a little while. West Ham are in a totally different spot. West Ham aren't in a great place, regardless of how good individually their players are. So I think maybe we played Burnley at the wrong time. That's, if we maybe played them in a month or 6 weeks' time, it could have been a very different game. I just think this was a big occasion for them. And look, regardless of whether we got carried away or not, I think we just have to hold our hands up and say Burnley deserved to win. They scored 2 good goals. They defended brilliantly. They got the upper hand on us on the day. Doesn't mean they're going to finish above us. Doesn't mean they're going to stay in the Premier League and we're going to go down. It's so early in the season. But sometimes you just got to walk away and go, fair enough. We weren't the better team on the day. And I know there do seem to be quite a lot of people who are struggling with that fact. Maybe just decided that we were going to beat Burnley and that was it. And if we didn't get anything but a win, toys are out the pram. But you've got to have a little bit of perspective, haven't you? It's a totally different kind of game to the West Ham game. Burnley completely deserved to win. I'm not going to be a sore loser and sit here and sit with my lip on the floor. It's not going to happen. Sometimes we are going to have to get used to that feeling because unfortunately in the Premier League, you don't win many games when you get promoted unless you have a complete freak of a season, maybe a bit like Leicester did the year after they got promoted where they won the league, which doesn't happen ever, then you're going to have to get used to that feeling of coming away from places like Burnley, like, Wolves, Brentford, Chelsea, Liverpool. We're going to go to all these places and unfortunately we're going to lose quite a lot of games, and you've just got to once you get your head around that and then you sit back and go, with a bit of perspective, we've got to just kind of take it on the chin. We've got to say, okay, unfortunately that's just going to happen sometimes. We're not going to have enough away from home to beat some of these teams, whether it's Burnley or Liverpool. Don't get too carried away either way. And the manager certainly doesn't, does he? I mean, Nick, you probably know this better than anyone, given you speak to him every single week. When we win or when we lose, he doesn't change, does he? He's kind of the same mood at all times. And having a coach like that, in my opinion, is, if we're going to survive, that's what you need. You need somebody who doesn't get carried away ever, because around the group and around the players, they'll appreciate that more than they would if they had somebody who was like a fan who gets really emotional and maybe a little bit hyper when we win and we lose. It's different, isn't it? And I think Regis Labrise is such a good example for how to react to wins and losses, I think.
The most interesting thing about Regis Labrise actually is now you know exactly how he's going to react come win, draw, lose. He is, he's stable and he's consistent in that respect. It's more when he walks away from an interview afterwards, he'll pass you, and what he does, he just raises an eyebrow, or it's a facial expression which says 1,000 words more than he said in the interview he's just given, and you just get, in that instant, you get totally what he's thought about the afternoon. And yesterday there was a sort of slight raised eyebrow and that look of, look, we've got to take this one on the chin. There are issues here we didn't address, and that's something for me to deal with. But I'd echo what Gav says. I think the interesting thing about these first 3 fixtures is that a lot of people said, what a good first 3 fixtures. We could potentially, certainly on the back of the West Ham game, we could potentially see Sunderland have 9 points out of 9. But I think what we've seen with the first 2 games of the season is that West Ham are clearly a club that have got problems at the moment. Someone said to me as we walked into Turf Moor yesterday, West Ham were poor, I said, well, the other side of that coin is that Sunderland were very good. And I think for the first half yesterday, Sunderland were the better team. So there is a consistency there in that respect, carrying over from the West Ham game. But what we've also seen is that Burnley played a Tottenham team who yesterday won at Manchester City and who are being talked about now as potential candidates to win the Premier League this season under Thomas Frank. So they are a very, very good team. Burnley, I think it's gone under the radar a little bit. They've spent quite a lot of money this summer. Although one or two of those players were there last season, they've bought them this season because they were on loan last. In a player like Kyle Walker, as he showed yesterday, they've got a Rolls Royce of a defender. And he didn't step out of second gear at times yesterday, especially in the second half, and just tied it up. He's got nearly 100 England caps. That is he's the Granit Xhaka of Burnley in many ways. And you've got to give, Burnley some respect here that they, as Gav said, they were at home. It was their first time back in the Premier League. And also don't forget that Scott Parker's been there twice before with Fulham and Bournemouth. I think he's learned a lot from those two experiences and how he's setting Burnley up this year to compete in the Premier League. When I looked at the Premier League, the 20 teams, and we have to do, we at work, we do our predictions for the season as to who's going to finish bottom, what will be the bottom 3 teams. I found it really, really difficult because I look at that table from top to bottom and it's very, very difficult to say which of these 3 teams are going to struggle because your Wolves and your Brentfords and your Bournemouth. Look at Brentford's result yesterday. Your Wolves, your Brentfords, they're all very, very good on their day Premier League teams and can beat anybody. It's very, very hard to see where you're going to find 3 teams potentially at the bottom of the table because I think if we believe that Sunderland can stay up, I've got a strong feeling that Leeds and Burnley have also got the wherewithal to stay up. Who will be the 3 teams that finish in the bottom 3? I think there was a feeling last week with Brentford losing, they'll be there. But, they've turned around yesterday and beaten a very good Aston Villa team. Burnley, I think we saw how they set up yesterday and played very well. If we believe Sunderland can stay up, then you have to, by logic, say Burnley can stay up on the performance they put in the second half yesterday. And Leeds, they beat Everton. Arsenal's, they're the 3 hits. We're going to go to Liverpool and Arsenal and Tottenham and Manchester City and expect to come away, with our tail between our legs because that's the nature of the Premier League. So it's very, very hard to judge. And I'm a bit disappointed in some ways that West Ham are going through this trauma because they're going to change their manager, aren't they? And they're going to get someone else that's going to come in and they're going to turn a corner. So in a way, you want West Ham to continue with Graham Potter for as long as possible and hope that they get mired in a relegation fight. Because those are the margins that we're looking at. We're looking at not necessarily what's happening on the pitch, but what's also happening off the pitch and hope that 1 or 2 clubs find themselves in trouble from top to bottom and get sucked into a relegation fight. Fascinating at the minute. I know we're only 2 games in, but you can start to see that sort of narrative unfolding, if you like.
It's interesting with how we were looking at the fixtures. As you say, Nick, there was the West Ham game, Burnley, and then Brentford. And, you kind of look at those, well, that's a decent start. That's a good run of fixtures, potential for 9 points out of 9. But I made the point on the podcast on Thursday, I think it went out with Chris and Johnny. Burnley will have been saying, Sunderland at home, for our first home game of the season, brilliant fixture, because there's 3 points there. So it kind of works both ways, doesn't it? The Tottenham game for them was a free hit. But, they've spent, as you say, they've spent an awful lot of money this summer as well. And, again, in the aftermath of the game yesterday, people are going, we've spent all this money, we should be going to Burnley and winning. Well, yeah, they've spent all this money as well, and it's equaled the playing field a little bit.
And don't forget, Martin, they finished 20. I know people laugh about it, but they did finish 20 odd points ahead of us last season. So we weren't going into this under any illusions. When we rebuilt the squad over the summer, we've had to make that gap up just to compete.
Well, that's right.
Most teams, So maybe we, to go back to the point you asked about earlier. Yeah, we probably did get a little bit carried away going into this one because Burnley are probably a better team than people realise. It doesn't mean they're going to stay up. It doesn't mean they're going to finish ahead of us. But they're not a bunch of mugs. They're not just going to lie down. And, you've seen that they barely conceded a goal last season. they were really solid. So they're going to be a tough team to beat at Turf Moor. Doesn't matter who goes to Turf Moor this season; they're going to be hard to beat. They're set up in a way
in mind as well.
Really well.
Sorry, Gav. It's worth bearing in mind as well. Their opening fixture was Spurs. Their next fixture is Manchester United away. So the Sunderland game was a big game for them because they know in those first 3 games that this is their 6-pointer. Whereas we're looking at these 3 games, West Ham, Burnley, and Brentford, and saying, "Oh, what a good start! That's a very benign 3 games." Yeah, it's up the ante now for Brentford next weekend. But Sunderland have got 3 points on the board, and before those 3 games kicked off, in the sort of chats I've had with people, we all said if we had 4 or 5 points from the first 3 games, we'd be fairly happy. It's still on course for that. In fact, potentially on course for maybe 6 points, which would be over and above the 4 or 5 points that we all felt probably needed to get from those 3 games. So I think what yesterday did, I think was grounded a lot of people in think it was I know everyone uses that phrase reality check, but what yesterday did do was actually it reined everybody in, and everybody can sit back and say, actually, as easy as it seemed to be against West Ham, the game against Burnley this is what it's going to be like. This is tough. These players are good players, and it only takes a second. And yesterday, that second was the Anthony the little flick through for Cullen to score. In that split second, that was the difference between playing in the Championship and playing in the Premier League. And what Sunderland failed to do yesterday was Mayenda had that absolutely fantastic opportunity, 3 yards out in front of goal. At this level, you've got to take it. You've got to score. And that is the difference.
Well, I think it's kind of easy to get swept up in that positivity, isn't it? Because we've come off the back of the 2 playoff games or semis against Coventry, the playoff final against Sheffield United, and the first game of the season against West Ham, where everything's gone our way pretty much. And you start the game yesterday, you mentioned the Mayenda chance, somebody who featured heavily in all of those games. Dan Ballard wins a header from Xhaka's free kick. Brilliant free kick, knocks it into Mayenda. Brilliant, fantastic chance. And you're kind of thinking, this is going to go our way again. And in that moment, we miss a chance. Ballard does his groin. And we'd heard rumours about Ballard's groin during the week, whether he'd play or not. And, I was relieved that he was on the field to start with. But to lose a pretty certain goal and Ballard's off almost immediately after that, that disrupts pretty much everything, doesn't it, Gav? You kind of gone from a situation where we should be 1-0 up, everyone's flying, to ruining that chance.
Yeah, well, that, like we've just said, that's the difference between the Championship and the Premier League, isn't it? Even Nick mentioned the first goal there, but even the second goal, there was a lot of quality. I think Burnley only really had 2 chances. I mean, there was the one that got chalked
2
off.
shots on target.
Yeah, they had the one that was chalked off for the foul unsealed, but probably gets given that in the Championship. But that's the difference between the Prem and the Championship. You've got to take your chances, and these are lessons we will learn very quickly. I mean, we all know how good Eliza Mayenda is. For me, he's going to be a top striker, I think. I think he's got all the tools to be a top striker, but he's also learning every week. He's still a kid, and it's very easy to get, we talk about getting swept up and stuff, but, when you think about all the moments he's had, particularly at the back end of last season going into this season, Eliza Mayenda has featured heavily in all of those games and has been a pivotal player. But because of that, I think sometimes we forget that he is a work in progress, and he's, occasionally going to do things that frustrate you. One thing we have seen with Eliza Mayenda, though, I can remember there was a spell around November time, I think it was November, December last year, where similarly he had really good chances. I think it was against Stoke. Maybe Stoke.
He had Blackburn when he went through at the end, and then Stoke following game, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. So he had that little spell where he missed a bunch of chances, but he responded really well. So rather than, going the other way and maybe hiding, shirking, not reacting very well to the criticism he got, he actually reacted really, really well, and that's what I'm fully expecting with him. He'll take his next chance, I'm sure he will. But we've got to temper some of the criticism of him. I think I've seen people saying he's not good enough to lead the line. People doubting him, saying we need to do this, we need to. Look, Mayenda's quality, we all know he is, but he's going to miss chances. But But yeah, it was. I think we've sat here before in the past, Martin, and went, you can kind of tell after 5-10 minutes of a Sunderland game which way it's going to go. Generally, you get that feeling, don't you, when you see maybe a misplaced pass or two, or a ball bobbling over someone's foot, or missing a chance 3 yards out from goal. After 5 or 10 minutes of a game, you sit back and I do anyways. I'm like, you can kind of guess which way this is going today. And that was the feeling I got. I just thought, when you're missing that chance and then Ballard goes off, who's been so good for us. I mean, Dan Ballard's been absolutely fantastic recently. And all again, I talk about Mayenda being pivotal in all them big moments. So is he. He's been massive for us. And the players know that as well. They'll have, after his goal last week and his performance, because he was man of the match against West Ham, for your man of the match from the game before to leave the pitch after 5 minutes. And all the lads will have known that he's had that groin problem all week, as you alluded to. Yeah. We'd heard, hadn't we, that Ballard had needed a late fitness test on his groin to even play in the game, as had Habib Diarra. And you could tell in his performance as well, he wasn't as
mobile as he was last week, was he?
Yeah, that's
it. It's interesting because the Ballard one was, I thought when he went off, I thought the first half they coped with it fine. Silt came on, and I thought in the first half, Sunderland, I didn't feel like Gav after 10 minutes. I actually thought when we went in at half time that Sunderland were the better team, and they were the ones that were actually more. They got into the Burnley penalty area more than Burnley got into Sunderland's, and I thought that that if they carried on in that vein, they would get another chance. What happened for me in the second half, what happened was that Alderete just ran out of steam. He's a very, very good defender, but he's just not had the minutes, and you could see he was blowing towards the end, and I think that was important because that gave Burnley a way in for the second goal and to see the game out. And Sunderland, they were just they just didn't have the legs in the second half. Ballard's, it will be a big miss if he is going to be out for a couple of weeks. If this is a groin problem that's going to be, is going to sideline him. But the other side of that is Mutiele's here, Musuaka is here, Reinildo can play as a centre back. It's not beyond the realms that next weekend against Brentford, the back four could be Musuaka at left back, Reinildo and Mutiele as two centre backs, or even Sealed with Hume at right back. So that's why these players are in. This is why we've got a squad now of those calibre of players, because I think it must be at the back of Sunderland's minds that Ballard potentially, because of his injury record, is not going to play every game. So they have to have cover for Ballard. It's just a shame when he's looking so impressive again. And that was a fantastic header down from the free kick. That's what he's bringing to the game. That's what, not only is he a fantastic defender, but he's a threat when they're going forward for set pieces. So overall, you're right. Diarra didn't have the best of games. Lefay comes on, plays wide. That's not his position. So there were a lot of things in the mix yesterday that they'd have looked at and thought, it just wasn't their afternoon. If they could have avoided conceding so soon at the beginning of the second half, I don't know, it might have been a different story. As it would have been a different story if they'd scored in the first half. But that's, this is that learning curve that Sunderland are in at the minute. This is the first month or two of the season. It's a massive, massive learning curve.
Yeah, and do you think? Sorry, go on, go. Sorry to step in there, Martin. Just as well, by the way, talking about Ballard and talking about kind of coming back down to earth and things. As I said, he's been brilliant recently, but I guess that injury kind of highlights the problem with Dan Ballard, doesn't it? He has struggled virtually the whole time he's been at the club to stay fit. And I think one thing we've done in the transfer window is we've almost said we can't. Like last year, I felt like we almost accepted that some of these players were going to be injured quite often, and that we were going to do without them for periods, and that meant certain players playing out of position or whatever. We looked at the squad and we went, we've got Adjilisi, we've got Den Cirque, and we've got Dan Ballard. We know they're not all going to stay fit, but as long as one of them's fit, we should be okay. I think in this transfer window, we've gone, we can't do that in the Premier League. And I think that's why you've seen this this pursuit of John Lusumi go on and on and on and on. I think the club recognise, as good as Dan Ballard is, we can't rely upon him to stay fit, unfortunately. And that's why we've went out and signed various defenders, because in the Premier League, if you're relying on somebody like Ballard and he gets injured, as he has done, and then he's out for 6 weeks, we can't plug the gap with a kid. We can't plug the gap with fullbacks. We need a seasoned professional in that position just to cope in games. Alderete, as you mentioned, Nick, he did tire towards the end, but we've brought in somebody who's got significant experience at the top level, at international level, and even he struggled a little bit yesterday. And that's the standard, isn't it? You can almost look at it and go, yeah, that's maybe brought us back down. As great as Ballard's been recently, unfortunately, we can't really rely on him. And we're going to have to go out and spend the money on a centre-half. And I think we will. I do think we will, which is why we've been so keen to get this Lusumi in. But yeah, it's disappointing actually, isn't it, Nick? Because Ballard is such a good player. I honestly think if you got the Dan Ballard we've had in the 4 games preceding this one, if you got that for a full season, he's a £40 million centre half.
Oh yeah,
who Arsenal, Tottenham, Liverpool all want. Yeah. That's how good he is. But it must be so frustrating, not just for him, but for the club, that he can't stay fit.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and he is. Benno loves him. I mean, Benno being a former centre half, probably invests in more into that than others do. But he is a fantastic defender, and as I said, he's good going forward as well. I mean, don't take anything away from Jensen Seelt. I mean, I feel a bit sorry for him in a way, because he's almost being dismissed as, well, he's not going to be involved. But he is a very, very good player to have in that squad, because as he's shown yesterday, he wasn't expecting to play. He comes on after 9 minutes and he threw his all into the game. And he didn't do a lot wrong. I think, he's still a very, very good player to have in that sort of defensive unit, if you like. But, as you say, they're clearly looking for someone like John Lukumi and those players, because they are experienced. They need that experience, because that's going to be your foundation going forward. That is the key. Don't concede goals. And that's what they're trying to build upon this season. It was great to get the clean sheet against West Ham, and they'd have been disappointed not to have kept a clean sheet yesterday at Burnley. But that's at least now they've got a portfolio, if you like, of defenders. Because I think we counted the other day, I think they've got 13 defenders now on the books at the moment. Because let's not forget, you mentioned Elise, you've got Huggins, Sirkin, O'Nien, all those players that were at the club last season are still there. They're all still, fit and will be fit and playing. And they're all part of it at the moment. They're not going anywhere by the looks of things. So they could be very, very, very important when it comes to, December, January in the African Cup of Nations. And, that's a debate for a month or two down the line, because that's going to be a big impact on the club.
It'll be interesting to see if Ballard's injury kind of fast tracks that pursuit of Lusumi, won't it? I think they seem to have already.
Well, that looks like it's being played out in social media terms now, doesn't it? It looks now that Fabrizio Romano, the agent, the clubs, they're all playing this out on the social media platform in a bid to try and get that move pushed through. So there's clearly, Lukumi's camp are clearly wanting to engineer this move, and they're trying everything in their power to get it to make it happen. So it's going to be an important week, I think, in that respect.
I think he started for Bologna yesterday as well, didn't he? So at least he'll come in fit if he does come. But like Ballard, you can't pin anything on Ballard, can you? Like, as you say, Gav, he's such a good player when he's fit and when he's match fit. I think we've been critical of him last year because of his performances. Yeah. He didn't look fit wherever he played. But you look at his stats, and he's only played he's started 75 league games in 3 championship seasons for us. So what you're talking, almost 150 games of football. He's started half of them. And it's always an injury. I think he had a spell last season where he was on the bench because Mepham and O'Nien are in such good form, weren't they? But really, when he's fit, he plays. So the fact that he's only been available for maybe 50-60% of the games that we've had when he's been at the club kind of tells you that you can't pin your hopes on him being a first choice central defender for us.
But this is partly going back to when Ballard and Sirkin and Huggins and all these players signed. This is why Sunderland were able to sign them, because the parent clubs knew that was the issue. I think they were well aware that these players had, I use the word chronic issues in terms of, like, Huggins had that awful back and muscle back of the leg issue. and that's kept him out for nearly 2 years. Sirkin's consistently had these problems, like the wrist problem now, but previous to that, he'd had problems. Ballard's had hamstring and so on problems. And that was the gamble that Sunderland took in signing these players, because they knew that was the way in to get what potentially were quality players, and that's been proved, because I don't think any of us would question their ability and how good they are. What we're questioning is just how fit for purpose are they in some senses, because when they are fit, they are brilliant players, great to have in the squad, but it's keeping them fit.
It is. It's always, well, it's going to be a challenge, isn't it? I think that's, when you look at the likes of Sirkin and Huggins and Ballard and people like that, they probably wouldn't have signed the players that we have done this summer if they could bank on those being fit for the full season. But let's go into the game a little bit. I know there was a reaction pod straight after, so we won't go into it in fine detail, but it's interesting how we kind of see the game, because, Nick, I'm kind of more in line with your view of the game than Gav's. I thought in the first half it was a fairly even game. I thought we actually controlled it pretty well. I thought we took the sting out of it. The atmosphere at the start, they were all up for it. I thought we actually controlled the game pretty well, and it should have been, or could have been 1 or 2-0 up. Obviously, my end of chance we've talked about. There was also a chance for Talby. He just put past the post in the first half, and that was a really nice move and a nice ball from Adingra. But in the second half, we just started slowly, didn't we? And yes, it was a nice flick. You could maybe, I think Regis Labris referred to a mistake that we'd made, a small mistake that we'd made. And I'm not sure what he was, because you could pick a few little bits out of it and potentially point the finger at somebody. I think Talby kind of lost his runner. Xhaka didn't come across the cover. You might have done better with Anthony, but it was a nice flick and a nice goal. But that was just what Burnley would have wanted from the start of the second half. And it kind of changed the complexion of the game completely, especially when they have such a strong defence that they can fall back on, and they know what they're doing defensively. And from that point, it almost turned into a game like we are used to playing, when we're inviting pressure on and we just try to catch people on the break. And it was almost like a role reversal, Gav, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I'm glad you brought that up about the fact that Burnley almost played us at our own game, because I don't think there'll be many occasions this season where that happens. I think you're going to find this season for Sunderland, and this is something I said on the preview pod we did, that we've almost in this transfer window built a team which is, really, I know there's going to be situations where we can play a back five and we can play 2 up top. But I think generally speaking, the sort of foundations of the way we play football, we've built this team to almost be set up to never really have the ball or enjoy having the ball. It's almost when we're at home, teams are going to come onto us. We can counter-attack. We've got midfield players who are athletic, who are good at picking up the second balls. We've got a really strong defensive unit, a good goalkeeper. And then away from home, it's probably the same premise. When teams are the home team, they tend to dominate the ball. You sit back a bit. There's not going to be many games this season where we play a team that do what Burnley did. And I think in the second half in particular, obviously they get that early goal in the second half, and I just thought game over, to be honest, because I knew how good Burnley were defensively. I thought it was going to be really tough to get a goal back. I just thought, it didn't suit us at all. And I teams will do their analysis on Sunderland and they'll see that, but I still can't see many teams doing what Burnley did and just sitting off us. Not with the quality in the Premier League. I can't see it.
We had 58% possession yesterday, and I would put money on us not having as much possession in an away game for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
nailed on. That is very high for Sunderland. I think away, as Gav said, most teams, the way they're set up in the Premier League, Sunderland aren't going to see much of the ball, but they're quite comfortable with that. I think that was the thing yesterday with Burnley scoring so quickly at the start of the second half. Sunderland, I think they lost their cohesion. They didn't, they started to play not as a team, but they play more as individuals trying to win the war, if you like. And it just wasn't going to happen. And I thought that was interesting. With the substitutions were interesting, because I didn't expect Patrick Roberts to come on yesterday. And when he did come on, he was struggling to get the ball. They needed to get the ball to him as an outlet, and Lefay is better through the middle, not out on the left because he was lost out there. So it was suddenly they were wading about, but without any cohesion. And it was playing straight into Burnley's hands because, as Gav said, they are so good defensively. And it's interesting they started with 3 at the back again as well, because I think a lot of people felt that they were going to go 4 like last season. And at home thought they would go 4 at the back, but they didn't. You know, he's been quite bold. They've gone 3, 2 win backs. And I don't think Sunderland did. They were scratching their heads, I think, yesterday in the second half, trying to find a solution to dealing with how Burnley were setting up and how they were playing. And they were caught between a rock and a hard place. They didn't know which way to turn, I think.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the reaction to the game, because I think we've all touched upon it so far in this podcast, but we're going to have to get used to getting beat this season. And some of the reaction on social media, I'll have to say, because our Craig Chapman was at the game, and he said in the away end, it was 100% supportive. Everybody was on the same page, backing the team, walking out, positivity still. On social media, there's been meltdowns, there's been people describing that as a must-win game. We have to beat Burnley away if we've got any chance of staying up. We're going to have to get used to getting beat, Gav, aren't we? And it's going to be really important that we are all really pragmatic about this season and are all on the same page. We're all together to get the 10 wins, 11 wins, or whatever it is that we're going to need to stay up this season, because ultimately that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if we play crap tomorrow, crap the next day. We just need 10 or 11 wins this season and a few draws and we'll be okay. Yeah. So it's really, you go back to the reality check bit, which, yes, it's a cliche, but I think as a supporter base, and especially online, and you know what, regular listeners will know what we all kind of think of social media to a large extent, and it is a vacuum for noise, but it influences people. Like, you can't get away from the fact that noise influences people, rightly or wrongly, but it does. And I think we've all got a responsibility to just take a beat and keep the big picture in mind all the way throughout the season.
Yeah. I mentioned on the reaction pod we did after the game last week at the pub, that, and Nick was there too. We were all invited by Luke O'Nien to sit in on a conversation. He wanted to just speak to the local media and fan media about this topic, really, Martin. He wanted to kind of, I understand. Look, not everything he said to us was perfectly clear, but I think the premise of what Luke wanted to tell everybody was that this is going to be a long season, and almost the fan base has a massive, massive role to play in how well we actually do this year. And something he did say was that, every single thing that gets said online, the players take notice of it. He says, you might think we don't see it. They do. They check it. They look for the names. It's in their nature to do it. They go looking online and they go searching this stuff out. And that doesn't mean you can't be critical. That isn't what we're saying here. What we're saying is almost, take a step back. Some of the stuff I saw online yesterday was ridiculous. I think the first thing I saw when I opened Twitter, which is a mistake anyways, I shouldn't open Twitter at full time. But the first thing that I saw was that there was no effort, there was no desire, and I'm like, how can you say that with a straight face? The players clearly care. They clearly want to be in the Premier League. They all want to play for Sunderland. They tried their best yesterday. It just might not have been good enough. And some of the things I mentioned before, we'd heard about Ballard and Diarra needing fitness tests leading up to the game. These are things fans aren't aware of, that we don't get to hear about. But then when we watch the game, you think, oh, well, he was shite today. He might have had an injury all week and he's playing through it. And that's maybe why you're not seeing the best version of that player. You get these things happening. I just think generally, to be honest, that we are going to have to get used to this feeling of losing games. If you look at the results from yesterday and you look at the span, there wasn't a single team that got beat yesterday that scored. So every win yesterday in the Prem, there was 5 games in the Prem on Saturday. They were all wins and they were all clean sheets for the team that won. This is a ruthless league. It's really, really tough. I mean, Man City, I watched Man City against Wolves last week and went, friggin', they're going to take some stopping this season. They absolutely tore strips off Wolves, and then they get beat 2-0 off Tottenham. Brentford, who everybody's written off, beat Villa and keep a clean sheet. Leeds, who looked very, very solid against Everton, got absolutely tortured of Arsenal. Sunderland fans, if you're the ones listening to this, and I'm sure the majority of our listeners are pretty, level-headed people, but we're going to have to get used to that feeling, unfortunately, of losing games. It's part and parcel of being a promoted team in the Premier League. And I do, to a degree, actually think we kind of, as a fan base, have to call out the hysteria that follows these games. Yeah. Like I'm not saying don't be critical. Tell you what, we've said what we didn't think was good enough today, but it's about being constructive with it, isn't it? It's about thinking about what you're saying and going, actually, the words that leave your mouth, almost, you've got to be like, yeah, but it's all caveated with the fact that we know what the direction of this football club is. We're all really on board with the project, the recruitment, the way we do things, the fact that we've got such a fantastic manager. That doesn't change because you get beat off Burnley. That doesn't change. You've got to keep that in mind at all times. And the end goal at the end of all of this is for Sunderland to stay in the Premier League. If after 38 games we've got enough points, job done. And fans do have a massive part to play, because Nick touched on it before about some of the people that he's not seen in 8 years talking about Sunderland. People were genuinely wowed by the fans last week. The fans in the Stadium of Light were unbelievable. We really did make the difference to that win. Things could have went very differently after a tough first half at times against West Ham. Without the fans behind us, it could have been different. Graham Potter, even in his press conference before their game this week, talked about the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light and said that's one of the best atmospheres I've been involved in. We, as fans, we make a massive difference to the way that these results go, the way the players prepare for games, everything. But it does seem to me, and you mentioned it there, Craig said himself, coming out the ground, that the atmosphere was supportive, positive, just like it was last Saturday. For the fans who are going to the games, they're doing their job and they're turning up and they're getting behind the team, which is brilliant. That's what we all want. I think there does need to be a bit more of I think you kind of have to call it out when you see it. I did it yesterday. I seen some of the bullshit that people were spouting online, and I just think if I don't call you out for what you're saying, I almost think I'm not doing my job as a fan. I think generally we've got to be quite supportive of this team and stay with the picture, and there'll be people listening to this, he's a happy clapper, he's this, he's that. No, look, we all want the same thing at the end of the day. All Sunderland fans want Sunderland to stay in the Premier League. We might have different ways of going about it, but ultimately we all love the club. We all want Sunderland to stay up. But sometimes people just have to put their phone down, log out of Twitter, wait till the next day when you've had a bit of time to think about it. Don't go running straight to social media to air your views on something, particularly something that is just purely emotional. You haven't really thought about it. You're just saying things because, as I said, the players do see it. They've got. I'm not saying that they're beyond criticism, but they do see it, and it has an effect. And let's remember that, because it's pointless. It's pointless losing your mind after the second game of the season. Let's stay with the course. Stay the course and stay with the plan, because we all know that this team will stay up if everybody's on board with what's going on.
I think it's the context of it as well, isn't it? Like if you're looking at after an 8-0 defeat at Southampton, where we've scored 2 or 3 own goals. Yes, yeah. Like that's warranted criticism. If you're watching us getting relegated from the Premier League under David Moyes and then the Championship under Simon Grace and Chris Coleman, seeing some of the performances there, yes, they're worth really criticising. A game like that, our first away game of the season, where in truth, you talked about the West Ham game, that could have gone very differently in the first half if Roofs hadn't made the save from Jared Bowen or whatever. There's fine margins in it. And again, if Mayenda puts that chance away against Burnley, that's a completely different game. We've got a lead. Burnley have to come out. We play our own game and counter. It's not as if we've downed tools halfway through and given up the ghost. Like, this whole club and squad is in the best state I reckon I've ever seen it.
Correct.
In 40 odd years of watching Sunderland. I can't think of another time. Like, people go back to the Peter Reid time. On the field, maybe the team was able to play better, or we had a better team. But again, it's a completely different time, and actually wasn't built on rock solid foundations. You get the feeling now the club is built so well, it's geared up to success. We've invested in really good players. who are all still settling in. The vast majority of them only played in the second game of the season. Like, Nick, I think perspective's probably the word for this. Again, it's not everybody. I think it's a small vocal minority on social media, but it just needs that step back and that bit of context and perspective, I think.
Absolutely. And I think, echoing what Gav said about the away fans yesterday, they all stayed to the end and they were fantastic. I've seen it in the past, games like that, they'd have been leaving 15, 20 minutes before the end, 2-0 down or whatever it was late on, but they all stayed. They were all there to the end and they were fantastic. And I think, everyone we spoke to, there was no anger, there was no, that wasn't an issue. And I actually reminded me what you were saying then about this sort of knee-jerk reaction to that result. When Sunderland first got relegated from the Championship, the first game was away at Luton. And if you remember, they drew 1-1. And the meltdown after that draw was unbelievable. I mean, you talk about perspective. It was all, we should be beating these teams. We should have been going to Kenilworth Road and winning 3-0. This is ridiculous. This is League One. These are teams that we should be sort of sent, there was just absolutely a calamity of disaster. It was just the reaction was phenomenal. Luton won the league that season. So you've just got to take a step back sometimes and say, give Burnley due respect. They're in the same boat as Sunderland are. And they were a good team. There's no question about it. Sunderland didn't play well in the second half. They've got to learn from that. But it's one game. There's 36 still to go. And when you say they only have to win 10 or 11, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's the Premier League. That 10 or 11 is a lot of games to win. But on paper, it isn't. And they're more than capable, I think, of, there will be teams, there'll be days that they fight, they play an off-colour Wolves or, an out of sync Brentford or whoever it might be, a Bournemouth or somewhere. And if they can make the Stadium of Light a fortress, if they get that they can get that atmosphere at the Stadium of Light every week, that'll be a very difficult place for teams to come as well. So got to throw all that into the mix as well. But you're absolutely right. Perspective is the word at the minute. People have just got to take a step back. It's 2 games in. You've got 3 points from 2 games. If you carry on that 50-50 ratio, they'll be fine.
Absolutely fine.
Of course, jump back in on that. Sorry, Martin. We talked about, and I mentioned this before. Mayenda was a hero at Wembley. Was a hero at Coventry. Scored a brilliant goal last week. He has an off performance yesterday, and then people are calling him out for it. And I just think, what good can that possibly do? Mayenda is a good player. You know what he's got in his locker. Just take a breath. He's not. All of a sudden, you've got people going, well, we need to sign a striker. We haven't got enough up front, blah, blah. And I'm just thinking, whoa. Would you have said that before kickoff? No.
Well, let's not forget Guiu yesterday came on. We only saw him for 5 minutes or whatever, but he looks like a strong, solid, threw himself in there. There might be a lot to come from him. So, we're forgetting that he's there as well to come.
Yeah. So when I said, would you have said that before kickoff? I don't mean about signing another striker. I just mean sort of like doubting Mayenda's ability. That people wouldn't have, because he was brilliant against West Ham. He scored a great goal. He's a good player. We all know it. We sing his name because we love him, because he gives everything for Sunderland. And he's a kid. He's a teenager still, I think. Or maybe 20, I can't remember. But he's a kid. Yeah. So he's a very young man who's learning. So, he needs our support all season. He does. They all do. Every single player on that team needs to feel the weight of our support. That doesn't mean you can't go, he didn't play very well. We've all said it. Mayenda didn't play well yesterday. He should have scored. But it doesn't mean we then run to Twitter, we then run to Facebook, or whatever other social media platform you use to then lay into these players. It's a very different. I think I almost, when I'm standing with my mates at the game and I'm talking about the match, we all say things like, oh, well, that was shite, he was shit there. But, we say these things, right? But I'm saying them to people in a conversation. Twitter, for a lot of people especially, it bridges that gap for people who aren't at games. They go to Twitter to have conversations with other Sunderland fans. So it's the kind of conversations they probably would have at the match. But unfortunately, it's out there for everybody to see. It's in black and white on a screen. And if people want to find it, they will find it. And that's where you've got to be conscious of what you're saying. I think what you're going to find, like people listening to this will see our social media and stuff. We are very supportive of the club and everything they're trying to do because it's warranted. In the past, when it wasn't warranted, when we had owners who who had given up on Sunderland or things weren't right, we would call it out. I just think at the minute, there's nothing really to call out. We've been really ambitious in the transfer window. We've spent far, as Nick said he only expected 5 or 6 signings. We've spent far more than any of us thought we would. I think we've signed a higher calibre of player than any of us thought we were going to sign. I never in my wildest dreams thought we'd go and sign someone like Granit Xhaka this summer. You can't. I honestly don't think you can question any of the decision making of the club this summer. We've done so much good work to get this team into shape for the Premier League. So just remember that, because it's going to be important. We've got a massive, massive role to play. If I could, I would get rid of Twitter altogether, if I'm honest, just to stop this sort of reaction. People might think, well, you're adding sort of weight to it by talking about it, but I do really think it's important we talk about these things, because we've all seen it. We've all went onto social media and seen the reaction and went, what on earth are people going on about? Just chill out.
But
it's going to get tough, Martin, if people think, like, second game of the season losing to Burnley is difficult. What if we will probably lose 3 or 4 games on the bounce at some point?
Well, we will.
That's going to be tougher. Yeah. Just, calm it down.
And, there's a difference, isn't there, between, the sort of crack that you'd have during the game. And if you're not at the match and you're on social media, you're talking to other Sunderland fans, I should have scored there. That was shit. He's put a crap cross in. That's different to making, very sweeping statements and proclamations about this person is definitively not good enough. We will never stay up if we've got this person playing. We needed to beat Burnley away to have a chance of staying up. Like, it's just bollocks. But it's that standing on the bloody hill proclaiming these definitive statements about how the club is, that it's just geared to bloody wind people up and get a response from people. And it's just, and people think, oh, it doesn't matter, it's only social media, it's not the real world. Unfortunately, it is. And as you say, I've heard
a current Sunderland player, Martin, tell us that the players read this stuff.
Read everything. That's right.
And I remember when Michael Beale was manager, I kind of accidentally bumped into him in a pub, and I was talking to him about this, and it was just before we played Middlesbrough. I can't remember what the score was now, but he said something along the line. He was telling us that the players, he was saying it really, he was saying like it really affects the players, when this, because we were getting criticised a lot at the time, and he was saying like the players read everything. He said they see all of this stuff. It really does affect them, both good and bad. They love it when they're getting built up and praised. I'm sure after West Ham last week, they were absolutely buzzing because everybody was licking their arse. And, it goes the other way when we're getting beat. But when I heard that from a current player telling us, this has a profound effect on them, Yeah. Like, they read everything. We really do need to be careful about what sort of, because we're early in the season now. It's early enough in the season to nip this stuff in the bud. So as a fan base, I think we have to call it out when we see it. If someone's out of line, let's put them back in line. We have to police ourselves to a degree. That doesn't mean don't criticise the team. Don't mistake what I'm saying for that. It's the over the top. It's the really emotional, aggressive stuff that people forget has an impact on other people. Let's kind of remember that. And we've got a role to play in this. We do podcasts every single day. We write stuff. Nick, on the radio, you'll have people ringing in on Monday who are going to be blowing their top about losing at the weekend. And I think the rational ones amongst us have to kind of call it out when we say it. It's not good enough. We know what's good enough. We've been brilliant. The fan base, the fans had such a massive role in the fact we're even in the Premier League. Look at the way the games went over that run towards the playoffs. But prior to the playoffs, when we weren't winning games that didn't mean anything, the reaction was horrendous, and we called it out then. And I think actually that should probably be a lesson to the people who do get a bit carried away. Like, look how carried away you all got before the playoffs and we got promoted. Just have faith in the people in charge. They know what they're doing. The players are a good players, a bunch of players. Let's just stay focused.
Look to your inner Regis Lebris. That's what look at Regis Lebris. And then Tony Mowbray was the same. You never get too high, never get too low, because Tony Mowbray was the first to say that if he'd been in charge and got Sunderland to the Premier League, he knows that if they'd lost their first 10 games of the season, he'd been sacked. That's a reality of the way that football works. And so I think sometimes it's valid what Gav says about just take a step back, just ease off the accelerator for 24 hours and think then about what your reaction is going to be. Because none of those players went out there yesterday wanting to lose the game. They all gave 100%. the way it's not their fault ultimately that it didn't go their way, because that's the way football works. They're not, if it was the perfect world, they go out there every week and win 5-0, but that's just not how it works. As you've said so many times this morning, they're going to lose games this season. They're going to lose a lot of games this season. And that is something everyone's got to tune into and get used to, because as you, Martin, said, there'll be a period when they're going to lose 4 or 5 games on the bounce. And you just cannot afford to get into that sort of relentless sort of abuse that seems to every sort of small thing that goes wrong is suddenly explodes into this turmoil, which is not there. It's just not there.
Yeah. No, I think it's just that realization that every single person connected to the football club has a huge part to play this season.
Yeah.
Every single person. And it's how can you play that part? What can individually each of us do? Some people can go to the games and support, some people can't for whatever reason. But what can we all do? And it's everybody involved in the club, the players, etc., etc. We've all got a part to play, and there's a clue in the word supporters, isn't there? We support. It's nobody else is going to do it for us. No other club supporters are going to come and support us. So we've got that role to support. But
the Mexicans as well, by the way.
Well, we have got the Mexicans. That's true. So that's that bonus. I think they were probably more rational than a small minority of Sunderland supporters. But there we go. The defeat has obviously opened the door, and the injuries to Ballard and things like that has obviously opened the door to a few players to stake the claim in this League Cup tie we've got coming up against Huddersfield on Tuesday. We will have a podcast before that game, Gav, but who are you kind of looking at to really stake a claim? Because we're going to have, as Nick said, we've almost built League Cup sides, FA Cup sides. There's a number of good players in there. We spoke about Mark Giroud coming on, and I liked the fact that he had his full name on his shirt, not just his surname yesterday. But Enzo Lafay will be itching to get a start in the league game very soon. Outside of those two, those two are going to want to put in a good show to try to earn the place for Saturday against Brentford. But who else do you see kind of maybe staking a claim?
Well, looking at the game on Saturday just gone there, you've got to kind of maybe the players who didn't stand out so much. They're the ones where the other players in their position will be looking and going, if I do really well against Huddersfield, I've got a chance here. So you're looking at, I think in particular Wilson Isidore, because he's been very patient, and he scored 15 goals last season or whatever it was, or 15 goal contributions last season. Scored last week against West Ham. He can't really have done much more to give himself an opportunity. And look, as I've mentioned, Mayenda's very young and developing, so he's not going to start every week. He didn't start every week last season. In fact, Mayenda's sort of spell in the team came towards the end of the season, didn't it? He was kind of largely held back by Regis Lebris. We were kind of crying out for him to play a bit more, and the manager held him back a little bit, but it bore fruit in the end, didn't it? When he had such an impact on the end of the season. So you're looking at Wilson Isidore. I think it probably comes a little bit too soon for Mark Q. However, I would imagine he's going to start against Huddersfield, and if he gets 2 goals, well, the conversations we'll be having all week will be start Mark Q against Brentford, won't it? Enzo Lafay, he's in a similar way to Nekla Triantis before he left. You feel a little bit sorry for him in that when he's had chances, they haven't really been in this position, so he's been coming on the wing. And we know Enzo can do a job on the wing, but it's those are the key words: do a job. It's not his forte, is it? For me, I think Enzo Lafay in a deeper role in the midfield is where you get the best from him. So I'm hoping against Huddersfield he gets that opportunity, because if Diarra has been struggling with a knock, and then Enzo has a great game, we'll be talking about that, won't we? We'll be talking about bringing him in. Obviously the Ballard injury opens up that position at the back. I think Mukiele is going to want to get 90 minutes and a good 90 minutes to show what he can do, because we've not, he's not come here to be backup. He's came from Paris Saint-Germain for 12 million quid. He's come to Sunderland to play games, and it's almost like the vultures circling to an extent. Ballard gets injured, and all of a sudden the other centre halves are going, "Oh, there's my chance." So I'm hoping he has a good game. Other than that, I think, to be honest, whilst I reeled it off on the preview, you can probably name the team on Tuesday, and it's a good side. Like you think you go around the players who haven't been starting. You're looking at Patterson in goal. Left back will be Masuaku. Nearly got his name wrong. Masuaku. Then you'll have Mukele. You'll have probably Sealt or Alderete if they want to give him more minutes. I'm not sure. Niall Huggins will get a game. You'll have Rigg, Dan Neil, Enzo Lafay in midfield. You'll have Patrick Roberts. Then probably Isidore and Gue as the two forwards. That's a strong team. That's a really strong team. And what I want to see, and we said this before the Rio Vallecano friendly, we said we kind of know the team for next weekend, and so do the players. But if any of them have a good game, they're going to be in the reckoning. And we didn't see it. And I know that was a friendly; it's very different. But this is a competitive game, so I'm hoping that they all, regardless of their position, they all look at it and go, "I really want to give a good account of myself today to get in that team at the weekend," because that's the most healthy thing, isn't it? We talk about competition, but it's not really competition if the players who are on the fringes don't take their opportunities. No, it's just an acceptance that you're a fringe player. I want to see somebody. I want to be talking after that Huddersfield game about 3 or 4 players who were outstanding and are knocking on the door, and that would give you the best impression of where the squad's at. I think because they're all strong players, but they've got to show it in the. They're not going to get many chances to prove they should be getting to that first team unless it comes to injury. And we know Regis Labrise doesn't change his team much. So unless it's for suspension or injury, there aren't going to be many opportunities to prove yourself. So you've got a chance on Tuesday. You've got to show it.
And Nick, is Tuesday's game a little more important now after Saturday? With obviously a positive result would be nice, but to see some players actually pushing the first 11 inverted commas for their position.
I echo Gav's team. I think it'll be pretty much that team, and I think what I would like to see this season is the club take the League Cup seriously. I think it's a big opportunity for those players to make a name for themselves in one sense in a cup run. I think the League Cups gives them the perfect opportunity to do that. They're going to come up against after Huddersfield, if they get through that, they're going to come up increasingly against more quality opposition, and it's an opportunity for those players that are not going to be playing first team football. And they'll be frustrated. They'll be wanting to play first team football, but it's a big opportunity for them to get minutes in games, in meaningful games. And I think the FA Cup, the League Cup, those are 2 competitions this season that Sunderland have got the wherewithal now with the players that they've got to try and make a fist of it and try and get somewhere in the competitions. Because we saw, the effect it had in 2014 when they got to the final. It's well worth being involved in these competitions because ultimately, what happens at the end is worth being part of. And it's, why enter these competitions? Why be involved in them if you're not bothered with them? So I think now, Huddersfield Town gives them a big opportunity to field a team which is strong enough and good enough to get through to the next round. Also gives those players the minutes they desperately need. But also starts, it's a feel-good thing. If Sunderland are doing okay in the Premier League, touch wood, if they're winning cup games, it's all part of that feel-good factor at the moment. And we want to try and exploit that because it's there at the moment. The optimism that's been in pre-season, the goodwill we had last week with the win over West Ham, that feeling is there. Maximise it. And I think the cups can help do that.
Yeah, it could be a big week, couldn't it? With the Huddersfield game, Brentford game, and obviously the transfer window closing in a week's time. So there could be a lot to talk about. And of course, we will be back with podcasts to dissect and speculate and all that sort of stuff over every day, forever, really. We'll be doing podcasts forever. Thank you for coming on, Gav.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us this morning, Nick.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. We've got another episode of On This Week for you tomorrow morning. I missed the recording of that one, but it's literally an epic. It's almost rivaling Titanic, I think, for the length, isn't it? But Chris, Andrew and Kelvin go into all sorts of things, including Bobby Kerr. And then on Tuesday, we'll be back with a bit of a news roundup and a look ahead to the Huddersfield game. And yes, there will be a few things to talk about with that one. But until then, it's goodbye from us.
podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.